say the exact same thing in school reading a history book.
No.
A history book is a compilation.
No.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Matt.
So do you believe that people are being abducted by aliens?
I really don't.
I don't either. And yet we have countless stories from people, and these stories are incredibly similar, including the descriptions of what the ships look like, including the descriptions of what the aliens look like. So there's a collection of independent attestations, and yet it is insufficient because the nature of the claim is such that we would require more. 100 people tell me that there's a new pet at the local pet store that's unlike anything I've ever seen. I'm going to go down and look for it. If they tell me they all got new dogs, I'm just going to take them at their word. But people tell me that they were abducted by aliens, or that they've seen ghosts, or that they turned water into wine, walked on water as if it were dry land, raised the dead, healed the sick, etc. Those things require investigation and evidence beyond just the claim. And so if you aren't willing to believe that people are being abducted by aliens, when you can actually go meet and talk to those people who made those claims, so you can get their firsthand accounts, how could you possibly believe a document thousands of years old that is a copy of a translation of a copy of an oral tradition by somebody you don't know and is so far removed from you temporally that you can't even investigate it?
Right, and then I'm not actually like trying to make an argument for the truth of the claims of the New Testament. I'm just looking for like consistency on comparing what you're saying to something that's, another historical event that has the exact same source material, but you're not saying it needs to be independently attested.
Well, usually when we talk about historical documents, we are talking about we need verification from non-biased sources. And so when somebody reports on a war that happened, if all of your information is coming from one side of that war, now all of a sudden all of their views are suspect. But if people on both sides of a war are reporting the same facts, where those facts overlap, now you have a good reason to think you are closer to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the New Testament is a collection of biased and unbiased sources. And when you go outside of the New Testament, when you go to somebody like Josephus, who is an actual historian, albeit very early and perhaps not with the best methods, you don't have those independent, unbiased historians confirming the facts of the Bible. Even in the testimonium within Josephus's work, which is probably an interpolation because it probably didn't exist in the originals. But even if it were there, all it really attests to is that there are people who believe this happened. It's not testifying that this thing actually happened. And that would be me like writing a news story about flat earthers. And then in 2,000 years, there'll be people who go, wow, there were people who believed the earth was flat as late as 2019. And that's completely different from the earth is flat.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and some of that makes sense. Some of it, just to be honest, it doesn't seem to make sense because we're afraid.
This deceived not only the victims but some of their parents.
Theories of fakes. This is 21-year-old Gemma Watts, a manipulative predator who groomed vulnerable young girls. And this was her fake online identity. She posed as a 16-year-old boy called Jake Watton, managing to fool her victims before sexually assaulting them.
She would wear very baggy clothing. Her long hair would be tied up and would be hidden under a hat and a bun. She would wear hoodies or jackets that she would then wear over the cap. And this deceived not only the victims but some of their parents.
Theories of fake social media accounts using her own picture, convincing her victims they were in a relationship with a boy close to their own age. She was only caught when a doctor raised concerns and contacted social services. In a statement, one of her victims said, "When police told me, my heart exploded and my world stopped. I'm so angry. I've had self-harm and suicide attempts." This is 21-year-old Gemma Watts, a manipulative predator.
This bitch dressed like a 16-year-old boy so she can get some pussy. Wow. Ain't no motherfucking bitches want pussy that bad. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy. Oh.
To Josephus saying, all he was saying is people, he does make specific claims, at least, the crucifixion of Jesus under Pilate and Jesus having a brother named James. I mean, those are specific. Those aren't just, hey, a bunch of people at the time believed it. Those are specific attestations of, certain claims of the New Testament.
No. These are not claims of fact. These are claims about what people believe. Josephus wasn't even alive when these things occurred.
Right, you can be extremely specific and still be wrong.
Right, okay, so yeah, I guess I do have to backtrack because Josephus was like beginning of the 1st century, if I'm not mistaken, beginning of the 2nd century, something like that.
Around 60, 75, I think, is when he was born. I might be wrong in the dates, but at best, he was talking to second or third hand sources, and he's reporting on what they believe to be true. He cannot report these things actually happened.
Right, and I guess in all fairness, in 100 years, nobody will be able to actually say that the Holocaust actually happened.
Except that we have documents from Holocaust survivors.
And we can go to concentration camps.
And people on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can, again, in 100 years, you could say, well, I don't know if those were actually written by the people who survived the Holocaust. I mean, you could be skeptical to the point where it's,
You could, but we are at a point where the documentation process is much stronger now than it is for something 2,000 years ago.
Right.
And so it becomes increasingly irrational to suggest that multiple reports from people on both sides
plus
of an
photos
issue
and videos and audio
can't get us to something close to a good understanding of what likely happened. Now, I don't think you can be absolutely certain about anything, let alone, historical claims. But you can be, what you can say is, in the 20th century, we have countless reports of a war. We have video footage, photographs, and we have accounts from people who claimed to be there, who survived that, who lost family members there. And so, yes, in 2,000 years, Holocaust denialism might be slightly more plausible than it is now, but what you're kind of overlooking is that as our ability to record and save information and make sure that it doesn't change over time, when you have digital recordings of things, and you can never prove absolutely that something hasn't been manipulated or that the masterminds at Google are secretly going in and changing all of this. But that is a claim that is itself extraordinary, and you would need to demonstrate the likelihood of that.
Right.
This is very different from, hey, we have this book, and it's a collection of writings, most of those writings, we have no idea who the author is. We know currently from the information, we have no originals, no original manuscripts at all, let alone who wrote them. And all of these were collected by believers, and they essentially held councils to vote on what was getting in and what wasn't. We don't tend to vote on what gets put into the history books.
Well, Texas does.
That's the history textbooks that we give to kids. But it's like the Library of Congress is, if you write a book and you get an ISBN, it's going in.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
I mean, what you're saying makes sense. Like, I understand what you're saying. It's just there's variances in certain things that I either don't necessarily agree with or I think are being misrepresented. And not purposely, I don't think.
Like what?
Saying, well, like the issue of the New Testament documents not having independent attestation of, like, say, those who didn't have a bias or didn't affirm it to be true, stuff like that. When, from what I've read, there's plenty of that, actually.
Wait,
Like
where?
Well, I think the Jewish Talmud, first of all, I mean, they write about Jesus and not in a very flattering, light way. I mean, but they write about him and that he was a blasphemer. And I mean, that to me is probably the best attestation you can get is someone who hates you and is still saying, at the very least, there are claims written about him that happen to be in the New Testament that are true.
That would be
That's just one of the things.
That would be a good point if you were arguing against a claim of mythicism. But it's not a good point if you are arguing for divinity, because the Talmud.
No, I'm not arguing. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I'm not arguing for theism at all.
I just lost my headset.
Oh. I'm sorry. Let me know when you're back.
Can you?
Yeah,
hear?
I can hear. I can hear just fine. Okay, so I know, because we've had this conversation before
I'm
as
back.
well. That you're not trying to argue for divinity yet. You're trying to establish a baseline of Jesus existed, and then we can go from there. Is that right?
No, that was definitely in the context of the conversation that you and Eric and I had. This was just mainly on consistency of you need independent attestation for that is compiled of independent attestation. That's the part where I was getting hazy.
I guess my question for you then is that if you're not trying to argue for divinity and you're not arguing on behalf of theism, then why would you care? Why should we care?
Why would it? What?
Whether or not we can use the Bible to prove the Bible.
Well, like basically, it seems like there's if what I'm saying is right, and that's a big if, I'm sure. If you're saying you need independent attestation, but the compilation itself is the independent attestation, then there's got to be something else that you're actually meaning, and you're looking for something else to verify the validity of the independent attestation.
But I've described that. What we're looking for is unbiased sources, and preferably sources that are in opposition. And so when you go to, like, the Talmud, and you look at the passages that some people would view as talking about Jesus, there's a lot of problems with them, because you've got Yeshua ben Pintera and a view that he was killed in almost the 2nd century CE. That clearly can't be talking about the same Jesus. So, but even if it was, even if the Talmud included, around this year, give or take a couple, there was a heretic who was killed at the hand of Pontius Pilate, etc. None of that gets to. Can you still hear me if I talk?
Yep.
Because my headset went out. There it is. None of that gets to whether or not these events occurred, the miraculous events, the things that might lead to divinity, and there were plenty of potential messiahs and people whose name was Yeshua, and to just argue that because there was a mention that this then affirms not only the existence of the particular one that you're talking about, that's a problem. You may be right, you may not. But none of that gets us any closer to whether or not this was not just an itinerant rabbi who was preaching heretical things, but whether or not this was the Son of God who died for our sins. And plus, I don't even think we need to go into potential evidence for that, because the notion is absurd in the first place.
So if there were more, like, say, archaeology discovers, in 100 years, if there's a bunch of more, unbiased, opposition attestations for, Jesus, Yeshua, whatever. Can we just say the same thing? Because you're saying, like, we need it to be unbiased. We need it from the opposition. That would give it more credibility. But even if we had that, couldn't we say the exact same thing? Well, we don't know that they're talking about that Yeshua.
Well, yeah, we would need them to talk about that.
We need to be pretty specific. Here's the big question you need to ask, Jonathan.
Go ahead.
If there is a God, and the story about Jesus is true, where God essentially takes human form, comes down and sacrifices himself to serve as a loophole for rules that he created. And it is important for us now, 2,000 years later, to have an evidence-based, warranted belief in this in order to accept it. Then how could we ever be having discussions and debates with confusion about which Jesus we're talking about, or are we talking about Jesus, and we can't verify miracles? If there is a God, that God has utterly failed at understanding good standards of evidence, because there should be no debate. This has got to be, if this is all true, this has got to be the single most important thing in the entire history of the world. And it is not sufficiently attested to and backed up with evidence, and that has to be God's fault. What kind of idiot does this?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but there's, and again, you could be skeptical to the point of being like irrational, right? So, I mean, any level of evidence that should, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Skepticism is rational. Skepticism is not, I don't believe. Skepticism is a process by which we want our internal model of reality to match reality. And so we are not going to become convinced of things until the evidence warrants it. Skepticism is not cynicism. It's not debunking. It is not saying, no. It is impossible. It is impossible to be too skeptical.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Because skepticism is about testing to be as correct as possible. Can you be too correct?
No, I guess you can't be too correct.
There you go.
You can't have like too much evidence. But it's like, I could say I don't believe that my mother and my father are actually my mother and father, even though that's, to me, that's too skeptical. Like, I have no reason not to believe it.
That's not too skeptical.
DNA test.
You can deny whatever you want. You can be a Holocaust denier, but you can't say that you're doing it because you're skeptical.
Right, exactly.
You don't understand skepticism if you think that you can be too skeptical. And that's why I said, can you be too correct? Because that's what skepticism is. It is, let's use the best methods to avoid being wrong. Now, can you be wrong and still be skeptical? Absolutely. Because for some things, there may not ever be enough evidence to warrant it. I have no idea what happened before the Big Bang, or whether that sentence even makes sense.
Right, yeah.
But my skepticism is, I'm going to believe it when the evidence warrants it, and not a moment before. Because if I believe it before the evidence warrants it, now I'm being unskeptical, I am being gullible, I am being irrational. And if I deny that something exists when there is sufficient evidence for it, that's also not skepticism.
Right, exactly.
So, like, being like a hard solipsist is not like skeptical, like of other people actually existing.
No, being a hard solipsist is asserting a position that you can't demonstrate, and that would not be consistent with skepticism. Being a soft solipsist is consistent with skepticism, because that's an acknowledgement that I cannot demonstrate that I'm not the only mind in the world.
Oh, okay. I didn't know the distinction between those two.
Yeah.
Hard solipsism is nobody exists but me.
Which then is a claim that you cannot prove or disprove, and therefore it's illogical to hold it.
Yeah, essentially it's about falsifiability. I can't falsify the proposition there is no God. I can't falsify the proposition, well, that's falsifiable by demonstrating that a God exists.
Right.
But I cannot demonstrate that it's not the case, that it is the case that I am in fact the only mind. There's no way to show that that's false.
So, I mean, like, something that's, like, extremely well accepted scientifically, or, you know, with the best methods that we have on determining what's more probable to be true, like, pick something like how stars form, or, you know, something that's easy that we understand with physics and astronomy and stuff. For someone to actually be aware of all of this evidence and information and say, I'm still not convinced, that he was not being too skeptical when all of the evidence suggests that's true?
No, they're not being too skeptical. They're being irrational.
The skepticism doesn't have anything to do with it. It just goes straight to irrationality.
The skepticism would say, when there's sufficient evidence, I will accept it. And you are describing a scenario where there is sufficient evidence, but someone won't accept it. That's not skepticism. That's cynicism.
Isn't that subjective, though, to the individual?
It's going to be up to you to determine what is going to convince you or not. But you can't claim that your standards of being convinced are objectively correct. That's something you need to demonstrate. For example, you could say, well, you could be the doubting Thomas thing. I'm not going to believe Jesus until he's standing in front of me and I see the nail holes in my hand, which, by the way, is not sufficient evidence to warrant belief in that.
Right.
But you could do something like that. Or you could say, I don't believe you have $100 in your wallet, and I open my wallet and show it to you, and you could say, I don't believe it still. Well, now you're not engaged in skepticism. You're engaged in denialism or cynicism. And you can sit there all day and be convinced that you're rational, but you're clearly not. This would be like saying, I don't believe this pen works, and then I write your name and say, read that to me, and you read it, and then you say, I still don't believe that pen works. That is what you're trying to describe as too skeptical, but that's not skepticism. Because skepticism...
It sounds like you're describing, you're describing proof rather than evidence, because evidence can be wrong, but proof is conclusive.
No. So first of all, proof is a mathematical term. What we're talking about in science is demonstrating something with sufficient evidence, but also every position we hold should be tentative, and our confidence in that position should be proportional to the evidence. Mathematics has proof. Proof in the colloquial sense is just give me a demonstration, and you're saying, oh, well, that's sufficient.
Right. I think that the issue here is that we're working off of different terms, and Matt, you're kind of going off of the more technical terms of what skepticism is, what a proof is. And Jonathan, it sounds like you're using them how like normal everyday people would use the term proof or skepticism, but they're not the same thing. They're different concepts. Just like a theory in science is different than when I say I have a theory that Matt's gonna oversleep today. You know?
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think that this is, again...
well, that raises an interest. How would you define theory, Jonathan?
So I have... When I think of the word theory, I think there's like three theories. There's unproven theories, disproven theories, and proven theories. So I kind of... When it comes to a theory is something like theory of gravity, where the apple hits you in the head, and all of a sudden...
The thing is, once it becomes disproved, it's no longer a theory.
A theory in science is the highest thing that an idea, a hypothesis, can achieve.
Yeah, Vince describes like the inventor or whatever it is that's being investigated as the best model for it.
Yeah, a theory or model is essentially... There's an observation, and granted, there isn't a scientific method. There are a bunch of scientific methods. But if you begin with an observation, you create a hypothesis, then you investigate and try to come up with evidence that affirms that hypothesis, and then you attempt to disprove that hypothesis. And then there's the whole thing surrounding peer review and independent investigation, because the truth has nothing to fear from inquiry. And so if it's true that Jesus is the Son of God, then we would expect, A, there would be evidence for it, unless there's some reason for God to hide that evidence, in which case he can't expect people to accept it if he's hiding the evidence. God is playing world hide-and-seek champion every year. But if God is not providing enough evidence, then the fault now rests with God. If there's just not enough evidence, then all you can say is, I am not convinced, and no reasonable person could be convinced.
And you're talking in general, on a general claim, not like theism altogether. I mean, not just theism, right?
Any claim.
Yeah.
The claim doesn't matter. For different claims, there's different evidential standards. Like if somebody tells me, hey, I mentioned this earlier and many times in the past, hey, I just got a new puppy. Cool. I'm going to take you at your word, because I know that puppies exist and people have them as pets, and I know things about you and everything else. And I'm saying that knowing that I could in fact be wrong. But the consequences of me being wrong doesn't shake my worldview from an epistemological standpoint. It just means you are no longer trustworthy. Now, if you say, I just was abducted by aliens last night, now all of a sudden the nature of the claim has changed, and this type of evidence that we would expect for that should change as well. And so when you say Jesus is divine and performed miracles and rose from the dead and wants you to stop having gay sex and do all the things that he wants in order for you to live in paradise forever. That's a collection of claims that's incredibly extraordinary and would need more evidence than stories of translations of stories by anonymous authors thousands of years ago.
Right. If Yeshua, this rabbi, was just one more of the, there were 36, something like that, different sects of Judaism that had broken off into cults of different apocalyptic natures around that same time period. If it was just one of those various cults, and you said, hey, this existed at this point in time, I'd be like, okay, sure, fine, I'll go with that, because it doesn't impact me or my worldview. But once you make the claim that it's supposed to impact me and my worldview, then I need more evidence than I would for other claims. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. I think that way in my daily life as well, I'm sure. I've been watching the atheist experience for 10 years, at least 10 years. My best friend is an atheist. I read books from atheist authors. I read books from Christian authors, apologists, stuff like that. Why? And that's going to be maybe difficult for you to even attempt to answer, but how come I feel like I am being rational in coming to the conclusion that I believe the claims that are written about Jesus in the New Testament? I feel like I'm a rational person. I feel like I'm a critical thinker. I understand logic and reason. Why am I coming to an opposite conclusion?
Right. We demonstrated this earlier. You already said that you don't believe people are being abducted by aliens.
Right.
That means that you have one standard of evidence for the alien claim and a lesser standard of evidence for the Jesus claim. And the question you have to ask yourself is, why are you setting the bar so low for the Jesus claim and much higher for the alien abduction claim? It comes down to somewhere there's a hidden bias. Either it's fear of the consequences of being wrong. The consequences of being wrong about God are greater than the consequences of being wrong about alien abductions. Or maybe you have some hidden desires related to family members, as we discussed before, or an afterlife, or some preference for something that you're not willing to acknowledge yourself. But I would think that both of us would agree you have a lower standard of evidence for the Jesus claim than you do for the alien abduction claim.
I don't know. I don't know if I do or not. And even if I do, I don't know how I'd actually be able to determine that.
It's really easy. There are many claims about people being abducted, and you can go and talk to them firsthand and hear their account. And in many cases, you can go out and investigate things. They are closer to you temporally, in temporal proximity, in that maybe somebody thinks they got abducted by aliens in the last couple of years. You can talk to them, you can investigate, and you can look into this evidence, and yet I would bet that you don't, and you don't believe them. And yet, when it comes to the Jesus thing, you have sources that you cannot identify, cannot name, cannot talk to. You have no way to investigate these things. You are much farther removed from them in time, and the claim is vastly more extraordinary, because the alien claim doesn't violate necessarily the physical laws in the universe. There's nothing supernatural about the notion that life might have come from somewhere else to here, that there might be advanced technology. So you are accepting a much more extraordinary claim based on worse evidence.
So to kind of be specific, I have specific reasons why I don't think that alien life is probable. So I'm not here saying I know God exists. I wouldn't do that because it's monumentally arrogant, I think. I have to believe it because the arguments that I've spent 10 years reading about and learning about, and the vast amount that I've learned from the show, it has just led me to the conclusion that in my mind, the way that I use my epistemology or whatever, it has led me to the belief that this is more probably true.
Take the last three sentences you said, and replace any reference to God or religion with aliens or alien abductions? And why is it?
Well, that's not the same. It's not the same thing because I'm aware of evidence that makes alien life unlikely.
Okay, what is that evidence? Because we know, no. Science shows that alien life is not only incredibly likely, but probable. Whether or not they come here, whether or not they have technology where they could come here and abduct people is a separate issue. But life outside of Earth is wholly unremarkable. Do you know how big the universe is? It's far more improbable that life only exists on this one little frickin' rock.
Okay, Jonathan. Jonathan. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to have to move on, I think, to some other callers. But I have some homework for you if you would like to call back. Make a list. Awesome, me too. Make a list of the reasons you don't accept alien abduction. And then make a list of, and then compare claims about Jesus' existence to that list.
And I want to finish the one, when you're done, I want to finish the one thought that kind of got sidetracked. Because when I said take the last three sentences and anywhere that references God or religion, substitute alien abduction, and you interrupted right away, and it's fine, I interrupt too, it's not a big deal. What I was going to say is, if you literally go back and type out what you said and change it so that it is three sentences about alien abductions, ask yourself, how is it, if someone who believes there were alien abductions said those three sentences to you, how would you reply? That's where I was going.
Mm-hmm. So do some thinking on that. Maybe write out a little bit of a list and call back next week and we'll continue the conversation.
Okay, I will definitely give it a shot, and I don't want to promise that I can get back to you next week, but I will definitely call back again when I have a chance.
Awesome.
And I had a great time talking with you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for calling in. I think another thing to bring up is just that argumentum ad populum is the fallacy of assuming things are true because a large portion of the population agrees with you. I think that subconsciously that is an extremely important thing that people grab onto. If we lived in a society that was built around the acceptance of aliens, it would be a lot more likely that you also accepted that aliens existed.
That is a brilliant point.
Right? So, if you are living in this society, whether or not you think you have individual personal biases, you are biased just by default because of the way our society is set up and because of the number of people who are theists in the society.
Yeah, skepticism is about doing whatever you can to remove as much of your personal bias as possible. You're never going to be a perfect thinker, a perfect skeptic. You're not going to get rid of all your biases, but doing everything you can to figure out what those are. And if you have a different standard of evidence, a lower standard of evidence for something that is obviously more extraordinary, you got to ask why.
Exactly.
And maybe what V was pointing out about the popularity of this, that might be the biggest thing.
Yeah, ask yourself, am I believing this because other people also believe this thing? That kind of was a big part of my deconversion.
All right, man. Look, I've recently heard a few shows from you guys. I've kind of went on YouTube searches and saw it, and kind of got introduced to Matt through some of that recently, and saw some of the discussions he was having with some theists in the past and some other past shows, things of that nature.
Can I ask one quick question?
I think. Yeah, well, hold
on a second. Matt wanted to ask you a question.
I just wanted to know if you'd seen the conversation that I had with Blake about whether or not faith is rational.
Yeah, that's
okay.
That's the bone I got to pick with you right there, Matt.
Cool. That's what I suspected. I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first of all,
and this is talking. So you're going to talk to both of us. This isn't a show where you're going to get one of those.
No problem.
All right.
No problem.
Yeah.
At all. Well, for one thing, I believe both of you guys believe in God. You're just suppressing it.
Okay, so that's a claim that you're making. Is there anything you can do to back that up or show that that's anything other than just a claim?
And let me tack on to that. Do you think it's possible that someone believes something and yet they're unaware that they believe it?
Yes.
Okay, so it's possible to believe in something and not know that you believe in it.
They suppress it, yes, sir. They may believe it unconsciously or subconsciously.
How do you demonstrate that?
They'll be denying.
How do you demonstrate that is possible, that it's possible for someone to believe something and not be aware of it?
Because your actions, we walk what's in our heart, and we talk what we think.
I agree that your actions always comport with your beliefs.
There you go.
What belief do I have, or what action do I take that betrays my hidden secret belief of a God, or Eric, or anybody?
Let me ask you, do you guys, both of you guys, I'm talking directly to both of you, do you commit murder?
Actually, I commit as much murder as I want to. I commit all of the murder that I want to. That's a Penn Jillette line that I absolutely love. Is I commit all of the murder that I want to, which is none.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't murder, but my reasons for not murdering have nothing to do with a belief in a God.
Where does your wants come from?
Where do my wants come from?
This is a weird line of questioning. Where are you going with this, man?
Well, let's let him go there.
Yeah.
I just want to know what.
Yeah, I'll get there for you.
Sure.
Where do my wants come from? I'm trying to figure out what you asked me a question. I really want to answer it. I just don't know that the question really makes sense. So, like,
gotcha.
Give me an example of a want that I probably have, and what you mean by where does it come from? Because I have things that I desire, and I couldn't possibly tell you what the motivation is, other than that it's something that arises from my brain as a result of complex interactions in reality.
Yeah, but those complex, that reality is what I'm pointing to. That reality is God.
Okay,
prove it.
That's not the reality that I'm pointing to. I'm talking about the physical reality that I'm in, that I am convinced we both share, and I'm not convinced that there's a God as any part of it. I'm talking about, like when I want to eat, that is the result of me not having eaten in a while and my body requiring nutrition. So the physical facts and laws about the universe dictate that I'm going to want to be hungry. In a similar fashion, if I want to ride a roller coaster, there is some set of physical facts in the universe that have led to that eventuality that I may not fully understand, but I don't know how one could say that is arising from a God.
Now, unless that's how you define God, John, are you defining God as the act of wanting?
Yeah, you're talking about the thing. You're talking about talking about physicality, which would be you're hungry. Maybe your stomach is needing nutrition, and your body needs it. And then there's something unphysical going on, and that's the communication between your body and your mind.
Hold on. Do you think that your mind is not physical, John?
Conscious of that.
Do you think your mind is not physical?
Yeah, your mind is not physical. No.
Okay, so hold on a second. Because we've been able to demonstrate a whole lot about minds, right? We've been able to demonstrate that people who get into accidents, right, into maybe a major motorcycle accident and suffer brain damage, those people completely change, right? Their tastes change, their attitudes change, the way they look at the world changes.
Sure.
They could develop certain beliefs or other beliefs. So what is it about a mind that exists outside of the body?
So I'm not saying that the mind exists outside of the body.
Then what about the body is not physical?
But what I'm saying is that the mind is an aspect of the material world.
Everything that we know of is an aspect of the material world. Can you show me something that is not?
I mean, you're saying that a mind is not...
The only thing, I would say that God is everything and also outside of the physical world.
Okay, can you point out anything else?
That's through thoughts, through your consciousness.
Okay, hold on. Your consciousness is a physical thing as well, Ron. Your thoughts and your consciousness are also physical. Name something that is not physical.
No, there's a conceptual gap there. I mean, science is objective. Thoughts and everything.
No, science is a process.
Subjective by nature.
Science is a process that we use. Hold on. Science is a process that we use to try and understand the world around us. It's not physical, right? It's something that we use. It's a process that we've developed to try and get closer to finding out true things about the world around us.
Where are the thoughts in your brain? If you open up a brain, you show me the red moon that I'm
stick you in an MRI. That's a thing, dude.
No, it's not. No, it's not. John is correct. That is a correlation. the place where John is wrong is in the very question, as if a thought is something that exists in some space or place. There's no reason to think that is the case.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that thoughts are things that are not physical. It means that thoughts are.
You're exactly right, sir.
Okay.
You're exactly right.
And so now you're in agreement with me that thoughts aren't things.
Right.
So that a question about where are thoughts is a non sequitur, because thoughts aren't things, so they can't be somewhere.
Right.
Thoughts are the labels that we put on brain states.
But they exist.
No, they don't exist. As you just agreed that they're not things. Thoughts are the labels.
They exist not as things.
Thoughts are the labels that we put on brain states, right?
They're correlated to brain states, yeah.
Okay.
Hold on. You brought up a red moon, right? If I were to stick you in an MRI and have you envision a red moon, we can see where in your brain that those places are being activated. And we're getting to the place where, to a degree, you can think of a red moon, and at some point we're going to be able to go, hey, that person is thinking of a red moon. There's some incredible studies about that.
Maybe.
So
based on reports. If
right.
I give you a report that I'm thinking of a red moon, and then you see that my brain lights up in a certain area, then you can say, hey, this is what red moon looks like from the standpoint of MRI or whatever.
In John's brain.
Correlation, though, man.
In John's brain.
But it doesn't matter, because you are asserting that minds are not physical. You are claiming that
right.
thoughts both.
Mind.
Oh, my God. You are claiming that thoughts are both not things and that they are things.
Yep.
Okay, that is a logical contradiction which nullifies your position. You have just affirmed both the affirmative and the antecedent. You have said that something is both what it is and not what it is. That is a contradiction, and that nullifies your position entirely.
But if I tell you that I feel a certain way, or if I have a headache.
Hang on, John.
That's a good example.
John, what does that have to do? What does that have to do with the fact? What is that, John? John, what does that have to do with the fact that you just affirmed two mutually exclusive, contradictory positions? You don't get to say that something is both true and not true, and when I point it out, you go on to something else about how you feel. You have committed a logical fallacy by affirming both something as true and not true. And you don't just get to skip past it. Yes, you did, and you acknowledged it, and you agreed to it.
No, I mean, let me be clear.
Okay,
please. Maybe I'm being misunderstood. I don't know.
No, you missed it, but that's okay. Let's go back.
Thoughts in themselves, like pain.
There is no self.
Of pain. And I'm just using that as an example because it may make it a little more clear for you guys. If I have a headache or a toothache, and a doctor says, "Well, hey man, I don't see your toothache existing anywhere in your brain or anywhere else. That's just your report."
Do you understand?
Hang on, let me finish.
Right. I would be kind of irritated.
Oh my God, John.
I'm sorry, am I talking over you? Go ahead.
Toothache. I literally have a toothache right now. Now, I'm telling you that I'm explaining to you that my body is experiencing this. Yes, it is self-reported. There's no way for you to ever know whether or not I'm experiencing a toothache. But that doesn't make pain a thing unto itself. Pain is the description that I apply to what my body is experiencing. Now, you can believe me or not believe me, but that's independent of this. You're going from the physical to the conceptual, and then trying to also claim that the conceptual is somehow real in and of itself. If every brain dies, if every nervous system ceases to exist, is there any pain in the universe?
No.
Correct. And so pain is a description of something that nervous systems experience, right?
Right.
And nervous systems are physical, correct?
Yes.
So this is a physical experience from a nervous system and a physical brain. Where are we getting to anything that is remotely non-physical?
Very simply, because there's a qualia. There's a
qualia is nonsense. Wait, go ahead.
Experience.
I reject
quality to experience. A quality to experience doesn't exist, like you said, as a thing, but it is a reality. It's a conceptual reality. You feel pain. That's a true feeling. Now,
it is true that you feel it. It doesn't mean that you are feeling something that is true. And qualia, by the way, I reject.
Okay, you reject it, but I know it's for real.
Okay, so hold on.
I don't, and there's no way you can demonstrate it.
Yeah, let's drive this back for a second, because you've done this twice now, John. You said, you don't, but I believe it, therefore I'm right. How can we tell that, because you've said you know that God exists and you just, right? Isn't that how you started this?
He started with we know that God.
Yeah,
we know that God
so
exists.
we kind of got off track.
Yeah, so hold on. Let's dive back here, right? Because that is incredibly presumptuous.
Well, the question that I had asked is it possible to believe something and not be aware? And you think it is, and I think it's not. So convince me that it's possible to believe something and not be aware that you believe it. Because to me, belief is a positive affirmation and acceptance of a proposition.
And right. I'm going to jump right here at the beginning and say, I'm right and you're wrong, just cause, haha. It doesn't.
No,
that's not what he's doing.
Okay, let's make sure.
That's not right.
That's not what he's doing.
Right. That wouldn't be right. That wouldn't make sense. So
yes. What I want for clarity is the example is the case under which you can show that someone believes, accepts a proposition, and yet is not aware that they accept a proposition.
Okay, so, and this is where I'm getting this from. It's basically from Romans 1:20. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bible.
Oh my God. I'm not only am I familiar with it, I'm very familiar with it, and it's not relevant. You might as well be saying where I'm getting this is from Captain Kirk in Star Trek Season 2, Episode 14.
No, hold on a second. Hold on. I see. Okay, so I've got the Bible open to Romans, and I've got the book of...
You going to what, Romans 1:9?
Romans 1:20.
1:20.
All right,
sure.
So I've got Romans open, and I also have the book of Eric open, right? So first thing I want you to do is I want you to convince me why I should be reading the Bible instead of the book of Eric.
Okay. Well, this kind of goes back to faith.
Okay. What is faith good for?
Okay. Faith is when you have confidence in the process.
Okay.
There's going to come a time, I mean, when you don't start with absolute knowledge and certainty. You start, if you're going to discover something, you say, hey, well, let's see if this is going to work. Let me withhold judgment. You just have faith in the process and see what comes out on the other side.
Okay, so hold on a second.
If you consistently get good results, then you can pretty much be assured that your faith is founded in something solid.
Then I would say that you would, then let's change that word, because I think faith is what you do when you don't have evidence. When you do have evidence, you don't need faith.
That's right. Faith is the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance.
Sure, Hebrews 1:11 or 11:1. Sorry.
Don't see.
Yeah. So
Hebrews 11. I got it.
So what's the okay? Yeah. So you're saying you have faith in your Bible, and I have faith in the Book of Eric. Which book should I have open?
Yeah. So first of all, look at Romans 1:20.
No, hold on. First, tell me which book I should have open, because you're appealing to something in your book. And I really don't think that book is a way to get to truth. So please demonstrate to me why I should hold your book over mine.
Okay. Prophecies would be a good starting point.
Okay, do you think people can prophesy? And that is tell the future, right?
Yeah, that's right. The Bible makes very distinctive,
no, it doesn't.
Very clear prophecies about the Savior Jesus Christ dying for us on the cross.
Oh, hold on a second. So in your book,
no, it doesn't.
Hold on. In your book, you're saying, I'm not even going to open the Bible, but I know Matt could prove you wrong on your statement. But let's just say that that's true. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, John. Okay? And given the benefit of the doubt, your book says there's a prophecy, and then also in your book, the prophecy comes true, correct? It happens in my book too. Now, how do we tell the difference?
Let me short circuit this with one quick question. Let's say I have a book that has been right about 9 things. Does that mean it's right about the 10th thing?
That's where your faith comes in.
Okay, there's no good reason for faith, and I'm trying to get there, but let's start here. Why? Okay, my book prophesied, right, that Sunday was going to come after Saturday. Do you believe in my book now?
Yeah, but that's kind of arbitrary. That's quite the same thing that I was.
Yes, it's far more accurate than anything in the Bible.
Okay, so let's say I wrote in my book that I died last week and came back to life. It says, Eric was going to die in the 3rd week of September 2018, and after a day or so, he rose from the dead, and it's in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you believe it?
Bingo. Yes, sir.
You do?
You believe the Book of Eric?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, my God, John. Oh, wait, hold on.
You just added an if.
Yeah, wait a second. Are you saying that you can demonstrate that claim in the Bible?
You just added a weird if.
Difference.
Yeah, hold on, because I thought you were going to be a confirmed Ericite.
I believe you.
So hold on. You're saying you can demonstrate the claim in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead, please. I'm bated breath here.
So you just referenced the Old Testament with the New Testament.
Yes, in my book that happens too. You name something that proves your book different from mine.
But you have a problem there with what you said too, because do you know who references the Old Testament? Jews, and they don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah.
Well, that's a good point. I'll give you that, Matt. You got a good point there.
Also, do you have any way to show that Jesus died and was resurrected?
Well, yeah, it's in.
That's what gets me about Christians, yo. Like, if you really a believer, shouldn't you be Jewish? I thought the Jews are the fucking chosen people. But the Jews don't believe Jesus was the Son of God. So now you're contradicting yourself in your own goddamn holy scriptures. Because the Jews wrote the Old Testament, which gave the prophecies of the Messiah. And then when the New Testament came that fulfilled the prophecies of the Messiah, the Jews said, well, that's not him, no. That's not the Messiah that we prophesied about. And so now you got Jews and Christians believing the same book, except one prefers the Old Testament and one prefers the New Testament. And the Christians like the New Testament because the Jewish faith has so many restrictions on it because they still go by the Old Testament laws and shit, where the 10 Commandments were written. And they don't eat pork and all this other good shit. And, they dress a certain way. Well, the Hasidic Jews, Christians don't want to really live that type of lifestyle. So they just stick with the New Testament and Jesus because, Jesus died for our sins and shit. Motherfuckers ain't fucking with that Old Testament guy, yo. That motherfucker was crazy.
Bible.
Yeah. Okay, no. You don't get to use the Bible to confirm the Bible. Do you have any extra biblical sources that attest to what the Bible claims?
Everything is found in the Bible. You use the Bible to interpret the Bible.
Okay, that's
then everything stupid. Everything that's found in the Book of Eric, and you use the Book of Eric to confirm the Book of Eric. Then everything is found in Star Trek, and use Star Trek to confirm Star Trek.
Which is why you don't use that to get to understand the truth about the world. It's not a reliable epistemology. Yeah. You know what epistemology means, John?
Well, this is why when he goes to Romans...
I think that's like the study of how you know
That's right. And so what we're doing is we're pointing out a tool to you that is not working well. Because according to the tool that you just pointed out, the Book of Eric is true. I'm telling you right now, I'm a sarcastic son of a bitch. I don't actually believe it to be true. But I can use this to point out the fault in your reasoning. Your reasoning has a gaping hole in it that can make anything in that book true.
Okay, what did you want to ask?
But let me ask you.
Sure.
Let me ask you this, because you're making a good point. I'm an open-minded guy.
That's right.
Now, would you say that the Old Testament, though, was written hundreds of years before Jesus walked the earth? Do you at least understand that?
I'm not convinced that Jesus walked the earth, but if he did, yes, the Old Testament was written prior to that.
And also, it doesn't matter. And I can tell you why, John, because there are texts that exist from before the Old Testament. And those texts have stories in them that none of us, both you and I will probably agree aren't true. So why would you say that the age of a story?
He's not making a case about the age. He's making a case that there are predictions that came before the events.
Oh, okay.
Right.
In the book.
Right.
Yes.
Right. From the book. Even the New Testament scholars, the people who wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John referred to those old prophecies when explaining what happened to Jesus on the cross, for example, different things. Referred back to those.
There's two problems here. Nobody is saying that the things written in the Old Testament were not written before the New Testament. That's not the position. The problems is that the things in the Old Testament are subject to interpretation. The prophet Matthew, for the author of Matthew, because it wasn't Matthew, but the author of the book of Matthew was really fond of going back to prophecy, more so than any other gospel writer. And matter of fact,
I know. Right.
Matter of fact, he goes to things that tries to reference things in the Old Testament that aren't even in the Old Testament. That's how keen he is on prophecy. But it's a matter of interpretation. And so even if he's writing, these events came to pass as it was said in blah, 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 blah. First of all, what he references may or may not be a prophecy. He may or may not have a correct interpretation of that. The Jews definitely don't think he does. Second of all, we have no way to confirm that the things that he claims happened to fulfill prophecy actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have is a statement that someone is interpreting as a prophecy, and then they're pointing to an event which we cannot confirm and claiming that event confirms prophecy. So what we would need is independent evidence from other sources, from contemporary sources, and we don't have anything like that. And so while you can take it as a matter of faith that the Bible's correct and that Jesus fulfilled prophecy, you don't actually have evidence for that, certainly not enough to warrant believing that this is the case. And when you go to Romans 1:20, which is for the things of God and the hiddenness and blah, 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 and so they are without excuse, that's 120, is that basically God has written it on everybody's heart, so they are without excuse. What Eric's pointing out is that he could write, there could be something in a verse of Eric that says, and all Christians secretly know that they are full of crap, they just deny it. And so when you call in to say that atheists really know there's a God, and you can tell this by our actions, and you started with the fact that we don't commit murder, what I immediately glean from that is that you are not aware that there are good reasons to not commit murder absent belief in a God. And so you've constructed this model. We could do the same thing. We could say, I do not believe this, for the record. I want to make that clear. I was a sincere believer for 25 years, and I know people actually believe this.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was studying to be a minister. I was a Southern Baptist, preached the word, blah, blah, blah. There are people who sincerely believe, but I could hold the position that none of those people actually believe, that what they really believe is something Dan Dennett pointed out, which is they believe in belief. They believe in the value of proclaiming their belief. They believe in the value of the community. They believe in the value of putting forward these values. And so they don't actually believe that there's a God. They just believe that it's important for them to act as if they believe. And I can actually, and this is the really scary thing, go to the Bible to back up that position. Because, there are many who call me Lord, Lord, who I don't know. And we all know that, even when I was in church, we knew that not only were other churches not actually in the Spirit, but we knew there were people sitting next to us in the pew that weren't. And I could argue that if you extend that analogy, it could work right down to you. If I have no way of telling who is or isn't a true believer, and I thought I was a believer and now I'm not, and I think maybe this person over here isn't, there's no way to show that anybody's a true believer, just like there's no way to show that I'm hungry. And so all of it becomes an exercise of faith, and not just faith as confidence, but faith in the Hebrews 11:1 sense of faith being the evidence for things hoped for and things unseen.
Well, let me ask you a question then. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was thinking one day about why there's so many different Christian sects if the message is considered. I mean, I get it. I understand all that.
Over 1,000.
Yeah, thousands of different sects and Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons.
By the way, as we're all standing up and being counted here, I was a born-again Christian, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's what I am. But then you have the problem of now back to that Romans 1:20.
Yep.
We look at creation. I mean, it's true, though. I mean, you look around, there's so much complexity in the world.
But complexity doesn't tell you anything about design.
Hold on.
It just happened by itself.
Okay, John.
Nobody says it happens by itself, and complexity isn't a hallmark of design.
And did that argument, is that what convinced you, John? Because I can sit down with you for 10 minutes. No, bullshit. Hold on a second. Hold on. Are you telling me that somebody said, look at the trees, and you went, oh, shit, I'm a Christian now? That's what got you?
It's not just one thing, though.
So because if I address that...
table that has many stands that it stands on. It's just not one thing. That's one major thing, though, I will say.
Okay, so
you look at the world.
You and I can sit down and we can actually go over why there's complexity in the world, and there's not a supernatural necessity. What was it, Laplace, who famously went to Napoleon after having published?
That probably didn't happen, but yes, that's the.
Okay, well, I like the story, so we're going to use it.
It's got to be true, right?
What's that?
Well, it's in the book.
Someone else would explain it to make sense. So why should I believe that? I mean, God is a perfect explanation.
No. Hang on. I'm trying. I want to make sure I understand this. You're saying that because we don't have another explanation for the origin of the universe, that you might as well just accept that it's God?
Because it's the best explanation on the table.
Okay, but is it actually an explanation? Because explanations are offerings that say, we're going to take something we don't understand, and we are going to increase our understanding of how it came to be by appealing to things we do understand. We explain the unknown in terms of the known. God has no explanatory power. It's essentially the equivalent of saying it's magic. It doesn't teach us anything about how it happened. We have no way to confirm it. We have no good evidence for it. And so when we look at the universe and we say, hey, I don't know how this happened, how is it different for you to say, I'm going to believe God did it, and for me to say, I'm going to believe it was universe creating pixies, and for Eric to just say it was magic? How do we distinguish between those three to tell which, because they're all viable for the same reason. They are all sufficient explanations for the universe, but we haven't demonstrated that any of them are necessary and sufficient or even possible. So we need a way to tell the difference between these three possible explanations: God, universe creating pixies, and magic. And we need to figure out which one of those three is more plausible.
Well, magic and pixies don't have books.
I do.
Sure they do. And by the way,
hold on. If I pulled out a pixie book, would you believe that pixies were more likely to be real, John?
Are you going to buy into the Cottingley fairies?
Same historical value as the Bible.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I feel like I want to.
What he said.
They said they have the same historical value as the Bible.
No, I said they don't. Do they?
That's the thing.
Well, okay, so again, how are you deciding what is true among those things? You need to actually have a tool to use.
Well, what is the Bible?
Well, I mean, you see the beauty in the world, you see the complexity, you see all that stuff.
I see all that stuff.
It looks like a mind was behind it.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, yes, it does.
And all the gods we've come up with here.
It may look like a mind was behind it, but that doesn't mean a mind was behind it. The fact that there may be the appearance of design is more about how little we understand about potential explanations than what the actual explanation is. So let me ask you a question I was asking a second ago. What is the Bible, John?
The Bible is 66 books written over thousands of years.
Sure, that's the Protestant Bible. The Catholic Bible's got other stuff, and there's the differences. But who wrote the Bible?
I mean, of course, God used the hand of man.
No. I understand that you believe that God may have inspired the author.
Wow, really? That shit just gonna keep buffering like that? Crazy, bro. Crazy buffer time on a YouTube video. Okay. I'm really mad. Like, my fucking internet still never kicked back in from this buffer shit, really. I'm about to go reset my router or some shit. I'm about to go downstairs.